There's an old saying in Texas that if you fool me, you can't get fooled again. In the late 2010s, one of the hottest startups in the private markets was the office rental company WeWork. By 2019, they achieved a private market valuation of $47 billion. Their valuation was mostly propped up by SoftBank. In 2019, WeWork tried to go public, but the IPO had to be cancelled once people saw the company's financial statements. WeWork was a cash incinerator, burning more than $1 million per day, and no obvious path to profitability. The company tried to cut costs, and they eventually did go public in 2021 by merging with a SPAC. But the business was still unsustainable, and they officially declared bankruptcy in 2023. The company has emerged from bankruptcy and is still limping along to this day. But it's a sad shadow of its former self. In hindsight, WeWork's business model was extremely risky. They didn't own any office buildings. Instead, they signed long-term leases for huge amounts of space, and then rented it out on short-term memberships. That means their costs were fixed, but their revenues were flexible. As long as the offices stayed full, the model worked. But if demand dropped even slightly, WeWork still owed billions in rent to landlords, which caused massive losses. WeWork's investors, mostly SoftBank, lost billions of dollars as the company imploded. But I have a brilliant idea. Just hear me out. Imagine if you make a business that's pretty much the exact same thing as WeWork, but instead of office space you do hotels. What could possibly go wrong? There was a Canadian startup called Sonder which aimed to do just that. In 2022, they went public by merging with a SPAC at a $2.2 billion valuation. Sonder's stock price collapsed almost immediately after it began trading. In November of 2025, the company ceased operations, with thousands of guests being kicked out of their rooms with almost zero notice. In this video, we'll look at why Sonder failed. We'll also try to answer a more puzzling question. Why did anybody fund this company in the first place? As a YouTuber, I work from home and I spend basically 8 hours a day sitting at my desk staring at my computer. For the longest time, I never seriously thought about ergonomics, until my back politely informed me that I definitely should. That's why I'm excited that today's video is sponsored by Branch. They sent me their Air office chair and their Duo standing desk. Honestly, this setup has been a game changer for my daily comfort. Let's start with the chair. Most office chairs are either bulky, ugly, or cost more than my entire editing setup. Branch somehow avoided all of that. It's comfortable, adjustable, and actually looks good in the room. Not like that cold corporate robot chair vibe. The lumbar support alone has been a lifesaver during long editing sessions, and sitting all day gets tiring. That's why having the Branch standing desk has been huge. With one button I can stand up, reset my posture, move around a bit, and suddenly I'm not a human pretzel by the end of the day. The desk is sturdy, smooth, and looks clean on camera. No messy cables, no distractions. Branch's furniture is very reasonably priced, so you don't need to break the bank to have an awesome home office setup. Huge thanks to Branch for sponsoring this video. If you want to upgrade your workspace, chair, desk, all of it, you can check them out by using my link in the description below. And now back to the video. Sonder was founded by a Canadian entrepreneur named Francis Davidson. He originally thought of the idea while he was studying at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. He rented an apartment year-round, but didn't live there during the summer break. During the summers, he started subleasing his apartment to people who were visiting Montreal for short stays. He also started managing apartments for other out-of-town students. He realized he could turn this into a real business. So he raised some venture capital and officially founded Sonder in 2014. Sonder's business model was to run a hotel service without owning any real estate. They rented apartment buildings and hotels with binding multi-year contracts. They often rented out the entire building. They redesigned the interiors of the buildings and added the Sonder brand logo. Sonder employed its own staff to clean and manage the properties. They basically incurred all the costs associated with operating a hotel. Plus, they also had to pay rent to the building owner. Sonder operated a website and an app where you can book rooms, manage your booking, and request room service. Throughout the late 2010s, Sonder raised hundreds of millions of dollars of venture capital, which they used to expand rapidly across the globe. From 2014 through 2021, the company reportedly raised over $500 million in the private markets. By 2021, they had rented over 300 buildings across North America, Europe, and Dubai. When they rent out an apartment building or hotel, they conduct extensive remodeling and interior design work before they start renting them out to end customers. In 2021, Sonder agreed to merge with a SPAC. The merger closed and Sonder began to trade on the Nasdaq in January of 2022. The SPAC transaction valued Sonder at $2.2 billion. One of the biggest questions on investors' minds was, why does Sonder even need to exist? They rent apartment buildings and hotels and try to re-rent them for a higher price. What value does Sonder provide? How are they not just a useless middleman? Sonder tried to justify its value proposition in its SPAC presentation. They rent their buildings from apartment developers and hotel owners. When a new apartment building is built, it can take 12 to 24 months to lease out all the units to long-term tenants. Sonder offers to rent the entire building immediately and start paying rent on the whole building on day one. This is a big benefit to the building owner, but it takes Sonder months to redecorate the units and get them ready to list on their own website. During this ramp-up period, Sonder is losing money. Sonder also rents entire hotel buildings and re-rents them on their own platform. This is a big benefit to the hotel owner. The hotel owner collects rent from Sonder. Sonder incurs all the management, customer service, and cleaning costs. The only way for Sonder's business model to work is if they can somehow be a better operator than a traditional hotel. They need to either provide a more premium experience to consumers so they can charge higher prices, or they need to somehow operate the building more efficiently to cut costs, or some combination of the two. If you want to go on vacation somewhere, you have 3 options. You can stay in a big box hotel like a Holiday Inn. This is boring. You can stay in a smaller boutique hotel, but this is very expensive. Or you can stay in an Airbnb. But Airbnbs are run by individual operators, so the experience is unpredictable. Sonder claims to give you the best of all worlds. They claim that they tailor the interior decorations of each location to fit in with the local vibes. Their rooms are cleaned and managed by professional staff, and they are cheaper than boutique hotels. They can operate more efficiently than a boutique hotel because they are tech-enabled. They have an app where you can manage your booking. In their SPAC presentation, Sonder claimed that their operating costs are 50% lower than a traditional hotel's. They are comparing themselves to an illustrative traditional hotel, not a real hotel. In other words, the 50% reduction in operating costs is just a number they made up out of thin air. We've covered a lot of SPACs on this channel. Most SPACs embellish themselves in their investor presentations. This is to be expected from a SPAC. But Sonder is probably the most outrageous example of a SPAC company making up a fake number to put in their presentation. They claim that their operating costs were 50% lower than a traditional hotel's. As we will see shortly, their operating costs were actually much higher than a traditional hotel's. So let's look at an actual Sonder hotel. Here's a YouTube review from a YouTuber called Faye, who stayed at a Sonder location in Chicago in August of 2023. This location appears to have been an apartment building that Sonder converted into a hotel. There is no receptionist. There's an electronic keypad and they give you a pin to open the front door. The same for the door to your room. It was originally a studio apartment, so it has a kitchen and a washer and dryer. It looks more like an Airbnb than a hotel. The furniture is not as standardized as you would expect in a hotel. This reviewer complained that the comforter kept falling out of the duvet cover and the shower's water pressure was so high that it was painful to wash her face. The cost was $250 per night. When she wanted to extend her stay for an extra night, they tried to charge her $350. She was able to find a traditional hotel nearby for cheaper. Chicago is a big city, but it's not nearly as expensive as, say, New York or LA. $250 a night for a hotel in the Chicago Loop is pretty expensive. Sonder was trying to charge hotel prices for Airbnb quality. One of Sonder's claimed value propositions is that they can tailor the interior design of each of their locations to match with the local culture and vibes. This is supposedly what differentiates them from big box hotels. But if we look at this Sonder room in Chicago, there's nothing in it that screams Chicago. It looks like a generic Airbnb. It could just as easily be in New York, or Boston, or Seattle. At the very least, they could have hung up a picture of the Chicago skyline. That's something that even a Holiday Inn would do. But Sonder just has some generic abstract wall pictures, probably the same ones they use in every other city. Sonder's customer experience is far inferior to that of a traditional hotel. At a traditional hotel, there's a front desk that can help you with stuff. There's a swimming pool, a gym, a restaurant, a bar, and tons of common spaces. Most Sonder locations lack these amenities. On the other end of the spectrum, most Airbnbs are operated by individual owners. They often handle the cleaning and customer service on their own. They don't have any corporate overhead. This allows them to charge much cheaper prices. Sonder is the worst of both worlds. Because they're in converted apartment buildings, they can't offer the same amenities as traditional hotels. They have hundreds of corporate staff who have to deal with customer service and other administrative tasks. They also have to pay professional cleaners to come out to each of their locations, thus giving them much higher operating costs than an Airbnb. In 2021, the year before Sonder went public, they generated $233 million of revenue. Their cost of revenue was $201 million. Cost of revenue mainly includes the rent they pay to the building owners as well as their cleaning costs. Cost of revenue was 86% of revenue, so their gross margin was just 14%. Gross margin is so low because they have to pay so much rent to the building owners. They spent $143 million on operations and support. This includes their guest-facing customer service functions and the employees who operate the Sonder app. It also includes the cost of remodeling new properties, utilities, and consumable items such as coffee and such things that they put into the rooms. They spend $106 million on general and administrative costs. That's corporate overhead. $19 million on research and development, and $23 million on sales and marketing. Their sales and marketing expense was more than 10% of their revenue. Some of the sales and marketing expenses consist of advertising, but this is a minority. Sonder has very little name recognition. Most people have never heard of Sonder. If you book directly through the Sonder app, Sonder keeps all the revenue. But a significant proportion of their bookings come from third-party online travel agencies such as Booking.com, Expedia, and Airbnb. These online travel agencies take a significant cut of the booking fee, sometimes as high as 30%. Third-party booking fees represent the majority of Sonder's sales and marketing expenses. In 2021, Sonder incurred an operating loss of $260 million, or 112% of revenue. To be fair, Sonder was expanding rapidly at the time, opening up dozens of new buildings around the world. Remember that when they first start renting a building, they have to pay the full rent immediately, but it takes them a while to renovate the rooms and list them on their platform. Thus, we should expect them to incur operating losses during this ramp-up period. As of the end of 2021, they had 18,100 rooms under contract. That's rooms that they're already paying for, but only 7,600 were available to rent, so less than half of their rooms were generating revenue. Over the next few years, Sonder completed the renovations on its new buildings. They also closed down some of their underperforming buildings. Their operating performance indeed improved. In 2021, only 42% of their contracted units were live on their platform generating revenue. By the first half of 2025, this had increased to 92%. Their operating margin improved from negative 112% to negative 23%. While that's a big improvement, the company was still losing a ton of money. Back in 2021, Sonder could explain away its losses by saying it was still in its hypergrowth phase. But by 2025, they'd already ramped up to more than 90% of their units. So why were they still losing money? Let's look at the company's financial performance in the first half of 2025. They generated $266 million of revenue. Their cost of revenue was 67% of revenue, giving them a gross margin of 33%. This is a big improvement from 2021. Gross margins improved because they're now utilizing more of their contracted units. Operations and support cost $76 million, or 29% of revenue. If you remember, back in their SPAC presentation, Sonder claimed that their operating costs were 50% lower than a traditional hotel. They claimed they were able to achieve this operating efficiency because they are technology-enabled. They automate the check-in process and answer customer support queries online through their app. The fact that they're spending almost one-third of their revenue on operations and support shows that their tech-enabled operations are not nearly as efficient as they claimed. When you check into a Sonder, you type a code into an electronic keypad. This saves a little bit of money because they don't need to employ a front desk receptionist, but these savings are pretty minuscule. A hotel might have hundreds of rooms and only have 2 or 3 receptionists at any given time. They represent a tiny percentage of the hotel's operating expenses, and the receptionist does more than just hand you your keys. They answer questions, help you manage your reservation, and a bunch of other stuff. Sonder still needs to fulfill all of these tasks. They manage customer service through the app. That means they need to employ hundreds of customer service employees who work remotely. Sonder's operations and support costs are far higher than that of a traditional hotel. Their units are spread out across hundreds of buildings around the world. Managing all of this is extremely complex. Their other major expense is sales and marketing, which cost 12% of revenue in the first half of 2025. As a percentage, this actually increased slightly since 2021. As Sonder expanded, it became more and more difficult to fill up their rooms, because so few people have even heard of the Sonder brand. This obliged them to increasingly rely on third-party online travel agencies for traffic. Remember that these online travel agencies charge significant fees. In 2024, Sonder signed a licensing deal with Marriott. Marriott runs a massive loyalty program called Bonvoy, where guests earn points when they stay at Marriott hotels and can later redeem those points for free nights. As part of the deal, Bonvoy members could redeem their points to book stays at Sonder properties, effectively treating Sonder like a Marriott-affiliated brand. Marriott reimbursed Sonder for these stays, but at a discounted rate, meaning Sonder received less money from a Bonvoy redemption than it would have earned from a normal paid booking. This discount is how Marriott made money on the partnership. Established hotel brands like Marriott already enjoy strong name recognition and a massive cohort of repeat customers through their loyalty programs. This gives them a structural advantage. They don't need to depend heavily on third-party booking platforms to fill rooms. They can even monetize their loyal customer base by licensing access to companies like Sonder. Sonder had nothing. They did not own their real estate, they had to rent it. They did not have their own loyal customer base. They had to acquire customers from online travel agencies and Marriott at great cost. Sonder has incurred operating losses since inception. In 2022, they had a big influx of cash from their SPAC transaction, bringing their cash balance up to almost $250 million. They quickly burned through this over the following years. By June of 2025, they had just $27 million left. Almost immediately after Sonder's stock began trading on the Nasdaq in 2022, the share price collapsed. It continued on a downward trajectory. In September of 2023, they were obliged to conduct a 1-for-20 reverse stock split to keep their share price above $1. By 2025, the writing was on the wall. Sonder was a penny stock company. Almost everyone could see that bankruptcy was fast approaching. In June of 2025, founder and CEO Francis Davidson stepped down from the company. One could make comparisons to rats in sinking ships. On the day he stepped down, Davidson made a lengthy post on LinkedIn. He blamed COVID for the company's poor financial performance, despite the fact that COVID had been over for more than 3 years by this point. He bragged about the Marriott partnership he negotiated back in 2024. He portrayed the Marriott partnership as a game changer that will turn around the company's fortunes. Now that the company is in such a great position, Davidson felt the time was right to step down and focus on other things. This LinkedIn post was a masterclass in delusion. By this point, Sonder's stock price had declined more than 99% since going public. Nobody believed that the company was in good shape. While the Marriott partnership did help Sonder acquire more guests, it did not solve the underlying problems of the business. Their operating model was too expensive and inefficient. If anything, the Marriott partnership would just make things worse, because Marriott pays them discounted nightly rates. In early November of 2025, Sonder ran out of cash. They stopped making rent payments to their building owners. The building owners started evicting Sonder guests from their rooms with as little as 24 hours notice. On November 10, 2025, Sonder laid off all of its employees and ceased operations. The company no longer exists. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. What do you think about Sonder? Let us know in the comments section below. As always, thank you so much for watching and we'll see you in the next one. Wall Street Millennial, signing out.